Welcome to Mindful with Minaa, where we explore how mindfulness can enhance your relationships and well-being. I'm your host, Minaa B, a licensed social worker, mental health educator, and author. Through insightful discussions, I will guide you towards self-awareness and self-efficacy, empowering you to effectively manage your relationships, reduce burnout, and be more present with yourself. So let's jump into today's episode. What's up, mindful community? This episode is all about imposter syndrome, but before I jump into it, I am opening up my coaching slots for high-achieving women who struggle with maintaining their own mental health, creating a holistic framework to take care of your well-being. You struggle with imposter syndrome, you struggle with setting boundaries, you're struggling with your self-esteem and sense of self, and you really just need guidance on where to go and how to overcome these things. You want to join my coaching program. So find all of the information in the description box below because I am only taking on a limited amount of clients, but my coaching program is open. And so now is the time to join. And I am so excited to jump into this episode because I used to struggle with imposter syndrome. And I know so many people who do. If you've ever felt like you don't belong, like you're not good enough for the role or opportunity in front of you, or that at any moment someone's going to find out you're not as capable as they think, well, you're not alone. That feeling, my friends, is what we call imposter syndrome. And today I am going to break down what it is, how it affects our self-esteem in careers, and most importantly, how to overcome it. So I'm going to start with a simple question. What exactly is imposter syndrome? Believe it or not, this was first defined in the 1970s by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. And they refer to imposter syndrome as a psychological pattern where individuals doubt their own accomplishments, feel like frauds, and are persistently afraid of being exposed as incompetent, even when there's plenty of evidence showing that they are highly capable. I am quite sure if you have ever felt like you have struggled with imposter syndrome, you may have felt like many of those things. You probably felt like a fraud. You felt like you were faking it. You had this fear that people were going to find out that you're not as competent as you claim to be. And you often minimize your own accomplishments because you can't seem to wrap your head around the things you've actually accomplished for yourself. This phenomenon is surprisingly common, and studies actually show that nearly 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. And it's not just limited to those early in their careers or people with little experience. Believe it or not, high achievers, perfectionists, and even some of the most successful people in their fields often feel like they truly don't deserve their accomplishments. I also find that when I am doing my work as a corporate wellness coach and I'm working with people from marginalized communities, especially women, people of color, and first-generation professionals, they experience imposter syndrome more acutely due to external factors like discrimination, underrepresentation, or societal expectations. And so these additional challenges can heighten feelings of self-doubt and the pressure to prove themselves. Personally, I am a first generation Panamanian, and I am the first person in my family to earn a college degree, 2 college degrees. And I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me to go to college. Now, I also wanted to go to college, so I never felt forced into doing what I did as a profession. I mean, I will say that when I was younger, I wanted to do certain things like go to school for fashion and stuff like that, and my mother was like, heck no. But as I got older, I grew more into the things that I wanted, and college was very, very important to me. And even when I was in college, I often felt like I didn't deserve to be there. I also went to NYU for my graduate program. And because I was often one of two Black people in all of my classes, I would often feel like I just didn't belong there. And sometimes I would feel like, did they mess up when they accepted me into this program because I just don't feel like I belong? And that really impacted my self-esteem. It impacted my sense of self as a student. And I had to constantly rewire the way that I thought about myself and what I felt I deserved, because I knew I deserved to be in that program. I knew I had a right to that seat that I was taking up in every single class. And it took a lot of introspection, and it took a lot of breaking down. Why do I feel this way? And it can be really hard when you're a woman, and when you're a woman of color, being in predominantly white spaces. And I went to a predominantly white institute. So I always felt excluded. I always felt othered. And that exasperated some of the feelings of imposter syndrome for me. So I want to unpack really quickly some of the effects that imposter syndrome can have on an individual, because it can take a heavy toll on your self-esteem. When you're constantly second guessing your abilities or downplaying your success, it can be hard to build confidence or feel secure in your achievements. And then over time, these feelings of self-doubt can lead to so many things. The first thing is it can lead to the feeling of perfectionism. People with imposter syndrome often set unrealistically high standards for themselves, which can lead to an all or nothing mindset. And if they don't achieve perfection, they feel like a failure. So we have to do a lot of work to recognize, first of all, there's no such thing as being perfect, but we can give things our best. But you have to recognize when trying to give something your best is resulting in you sacrificing your sense of self, sacrificing your peace, and sacrificing your mental health. Another thing that leads to feelings of self-doubt is the fear of failure. Imposter syndrome fuels an intense fear of making mistakes. Again, we feel like we're frauds. So you're always in a state of hypervigilance, assuming that people are going to find you out. So you don't want to mess up. And this can cause people to avoid taking risks or trying new things, essentially limiting their potential for growth. And so we have to be very, very mindful of recognizing that making mistakes sometimes is a natural part of the human experience. And when we make mistakes, the goal is to be solution focused and problem oriented and say, what can I do differently moving forward? Another thing that happens when we experience imposter syndrome is chronic stress and anxiety. It's feeling like you're constantly on the verge of being found out, and this can cause significant stress. This anxiety can seep into both personal and professional life, leading to burnout. Trying to always be perfect, trying to avoid making mistakes, and always existing in a state of hypervigilance is not good for the nervous system. And so you are going to eventually start experiencing something called hyperarousal, where when the body is in flight or fight mode. And so that is where we start to experience high levels of anxiety, or your body can go into hypoarousal, where you are in a frozen, dissociated state, where you're feeling a lot of fatigue and exhaustion, and this leads to burnout. So I also believe that when we're dealing with chronic forms of imposter syndrome, it also is now causing nervous system dysregulation, because your body is in such a high state of stress, you are no longer operating within your window of tolerance. And if we're not in our window of tolerance, we are going to feel dysregulated. Another thing that comes up when people experience imposter syndrome is procrastination or overworking. Some people may avoid starting tasks out of fear they won't be able to complete them or do them well, while others overwork themselves to prove their worth. So that's like being the person who wants to be seen as the star player at work. So you're working at midnight, checking emails all day, despite the fact that you're on vacation, and you're overcommitting to things. But guess what? I said it earlier, overcommitting to things can lead to burnout. Also, when we're putting so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect, that is going to procrastinate because we've already associated that task with something that brings us discomfort because we're saying, if I can't do it well, don't even do it. But if you don't start it, then you're going to have delays. And if you have delays, that is now going to exasperate feelings of anxiety. And when we have exasperated feelings of anxiety, that leads to burnout. So you see how it's all a vicious cycle of self-sabotage? These are things that you have to pay attention to. Now, there's another thing that happens when people experience burnout, which is they undermine their achievements. People with imposter syndrome often attribute their success to external factors like luck, timing, or even other people, rather than their own skills or hard work. This prevents them from truly owning their accomplishments. I think it's really important to strike a firm balance between timing, luck, and recognizing when other people have played a role in us excelling in life, while also recognizing we had to do a lot of work, even in the midst of having luck or even in the midst of it being good timing. Because there are people who the time is right for something and they still don't even want to try. They still don't even get up and do the thing. And so you have to remember that your ability to achieve things also comes from your own will and your own self-efficacy. So now that I've unpacked some of the effects of imposter syndrome, another thing that's important to understand here is that imposter syndrome doesn't just affect how you feel about yourself, it can also impact your career and relationships. Research shows that imposter syndrome is linked to lower job satisfaction and higher rates of burnout. And a 2020 study published in the Journal of General Internal Medicine found that healthcare professionals with imposter syndrome were more likely to report higher levels of job stress and lower self-rated job performance. Now, it's not just healthcare professionals, though. Imposter syndrome has been found to affect professionals across industries, from business and tech to academia and the arts, and it can lead to people avoiding leadership positions, turning down opportunities, or even leaving a field entirely due to the overwhelming self-doubt it creates. I work as a corporate wellness coach, as I said, and so I work with people across a variety of industries. I've worked with people in tech, I've worked with people in retail, and I've also worked with people in the healthcare profession. And the same thing consistently comes up. People are shrinking themselves, but they're shrinking themselves to a point of anxiety, and it's causing them to turn down opportunities despite their goals being to excel in the workplace and take on leadership positions. They often feel like they're not worthy of it. And so it keeps them stuck in this cycle of dissatisfaction because their bodies know they want something better for themselves, but they're too afraid to achieve it. So now that we know imposter syndrome is common and we know how it can impact our mental health and professional lives, now let's talk about strategies to overcome it, because while imposter syndrome is persistent, it's not unbeatable. You can do things to take care of yourself. But I always say this, self-care is a prevention strategy, not a crisis response. If you know you struggle with imposter syndrome, you have to be doing work on a continuous basis to challenge the way that you think and also be doing work to take action toward your goals. So the first thing that you need to do to tackle imposter syndrome is recognize and name the feeling that is coming up for you. It's important to recognize that when you're experiencing imposter syndrome and name it for what it is, we can learn to combat the things that are attached to why we're feeling imposter syndrome. Often we internalize these feelings of self-doubt as truth, but when you label it as imposter syndrome, it becomes easier to separate the feeling from reality. So remind yourself that just because you feel like a fraud doesn't mean you are one. Emotional reasoning is when we feel an emotion and we start to treat that emotion as truth. So if I feel guilty, and guilt means I did something bad, that must mean I'm doing something bad. You have to also tell yourself, just because I feel like I'm an imposter does not mean I am an imposter. I am not a fraud. Sometimes you also have to pull out the evidence, okay? You need to pull out that degree. You need to pull out that certification. You need to open up your resume and you need to look at these things to remind yourself that I am capable. So the next time you're having those self-doubts, try to say to yourself, this is imposter syndrome talking. I've worked hard to get where I am and I deserve to be here. I even have proof that I deserve to be here. Okay. The second thing that you need to do is challenge negative self-talk because imposter syndrome often feeds off of negative self-talk. The job of your inner critic is to tell you that you're not good enough or that you don't belong. And one way to combat this is by challenging those thoughts. It's all about cognitive reframing. You have to ask yourself, where's the evidence that I am not capable? And that is why it can be so important to sometimes journal these things out, write a letter to yourself, even engage in audio journaling to remind yourself, I have the skills. I have done enough work to say I deserve to have the things that I have. Most of the time, when you step back and look objectively, you'll see plenty of proof that you are qualified, whether it's the skills you've acquired, the work you've done, or the feedback you've received from others. So write your accomplishments down. Keep a journal of your accomplishments. Save this feedback as a way to remind you of your strengths when self-doubt creeps in. The other thing that you have to do is stop comparing yourself to others. Imposter syndrome thrives in environments where we compare ourselves to other people. You might look at a colleague or a peer or even one of your close friends and think they've got it all figured out. But the reality is everyone has their own struggles, and many of the people you admire may be battling their own imposter syndrome. Another thing that you can be doing to stop comparing yourself to other people is have conversations with them. Ask them how they got to where they are. Ask them what hardships they had to overcome, because it can be so easy to look at the final product. It can be so easy to see a person in a leadership role and know nothing about their resume and assume they always had the skills and the qualifications to be where they are. Sometimes we really have to get to know the intricate details of people, and the only way we can do that is by having conversations with them. So I want you to think about the people you constantly compare yourself to and learn more about their story. If it's a friend or someone that you actually know and have a relationship with, inquire, get to understand who they are and how they got to where they got. And you'll also be able to see it took a lot of hard work. It took overcoming hardship. Maybe they got help from somebody else. Maybe they got mentors that they learned from, people that they hired, that they worked with, and that's how they're excelling. So stop comparing yourself to other people and focus on your own progress. Focus on what you have achieved. Focus on how far you have come. You do not need to measure up to anyone else's standards, only your own. And do the work of inquiring and asking people questions when you feel like I have certain goals that I haven't achieved yet, but you feel like you're not capable of getting to where you're trying to go by yourself. Find help. Find support and ask people questions so that you can also get the tools that you need to get to where you're trying to go. Now, the final thing I want to share is that you need to learn how to embrace imperfections and learn from your mistakes. One of the biggest drivers of imposter syndrome is the belief that you have to be perfect to be worthy. But the truth is, no one is perfect, and mistakes are a natural part of learning and growing. Instead of fearing failure, try reframing it as an opportunity for growth. When you make a mistake, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What strengths do I see in myself right now that is going to help me overcome this obstacle? What weaknesses do I have or areas of improvement do I need to focus on so that I can realize this is the help that I need? Maybe I do need mentorship. Maybe I do need coaching. Maybe I need to read more books. Maybe there are just certain things that I have to recognize. I am not a perfect person, which means there's always room to grow and learn. When you embrace imperfection, you can break free from the unrealistic expectations that feed imposter syndrome. So you have to constantly be doing the work of recognizing when you are trying to perfect something versus saying, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to allow myself to be a student in this moment. You do not always have to move through life being a teacher. There are going to be times where you need to learn. You need to be on the receiving end of information. And so I really encourage you to do this work to really get to the root of your imposter syndrome. Also understand that sometimes the imposter syndrome runs so deep because of maybe childhood traumas or just really negative interactions you've had with people. So maybe you do want to talk to a therapist. Maybe you do need to hire a executive wellness coach who can help you shape your career, shape your personal life, working with someone who can give you perspective and working with someone who can help you really enhance your sense of self, your self-esteem, and your well-being and build confidence. So as I close out today's episode, I want to leave you with this reminder. Whether you're stepping into a new role, taking on a leadership position, or just trying something outside of your comfort zone, your feelings of doubt don't define your worth. You are capable. You are also deserving, and you are far more competent than your inner critic gives you credit for. And I want to say that when you don't feel competent, that is a sign that you just still need to keep learning. And again, it is okay to be a student in life. It is okay to say, this is just a season in my life where I need to keep learning. Imposter syndrome may never fully go away, but with the right strategies, you can quiet that inner critic, build your self-confidence, and take ownership of your success. You've earned your place, so now it's time to start believing it. So thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If this episode resonated with you, I want you to share in the comments. If you are tuning in from Spotify, let me know if you've ever experienced imposter syndrome and how you have learned to overcome it, or what are some gems that I shared in this episode that resonated with you. Please do not forget to subscribe and leave a rating because that helps this show grow. You can also follow me on social media. Order my book, Owning Our Struggles, which is available across all major book retailers. And again, please remember to be kind to yourself and remember that you are enough just as you are. Until next time. That's all for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you just listened to, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast on your preferred platform. Also, don't forget to share it with a friend and on social media. To stay connected with me and my work, follow me on social media and subscribe to the Mindful with Minaa newsletter, which can be found on my website, www.minab.com. You can also continue learning from me by ordering my book, Owning Our Struggles, which is available at all major book retailers. Stay tuned for a new episode next week, and most importantly, remember to be present and stay mindful. Take care and goodbye for now.